Thomas Aquinas versus Hermes Trismegistus. An excerpt from the Summa Contra Gentiles, Book 3, Chapter 104 to 106. Chapter 104. That the operations of magicians result not only from the influence of celestial bodies. Some there were who averred that such operations as seem wonderful to us, being wrought by the magic art, are done not by certain spiritual substances, but by the power of the celestial bodies. A sign of this seems to be that those who practice such arts take into consideration the certain positions of the stars, and are assisted by the use of certain herbs and other corporeal things, as if to prepare lower matter to receive the influence of the celestial power. But this is in contradiction with what is apparent. For as it is impossible that an intellect be formed by any corporeal principles, as was proven above, it is impossible for effects that are proper to the nature of the intellect to be caused by the power of a celestial body. In the operations of magicians, however, there appear certain things which are proper to the nature of rational beings. Answers are given about stolen goods and the like, and this could not be done except by an intelligence. Therefore, it is not true that all such effects are caused solely by the power of celestial bodies. Furthermore, speech itself is an act proper to the rational nature. Yet, in these operations, there appear to be beings conversing with men and reasoning about various matters. Therefore, it is not possible that such phenomena occur solely by the power of celestial bodies. If, however, someone says that such are not perceived through the external senses, but only through the imagination, this is, in the first place, apparently untrue. For imagined forms do not appear to someone as real things, unless there is a detachment from the external senses, because it is not possible to attend to likenesses as though they were real things, unless the natural judgment of the senses is impaired. However, these conversations and apparitions are addressed to those who have free use of their external senses. Therefore, it is not possible that these apparitions and speeches are merely imaginary. Furthermore, no imaginary forms can lead a person to intellectual knowledge beyond the natural or acquired faculty of his intellect. This is evident in dreams, where, even if they contain some indication of the future, not every dreamer understands the meaning of his dreams. However, through such sights or sounds that appear in the operations of magicians, people often gain intellectual knowledge of things that exceeds the capacity of their intellect, such as the revelation of hidden treasures, the manifestation of future events, and sometimes even true answers regarding certain scientific teachings. Therefore, it must be that those appearing and conversing are not seen according to imagination only, or at least this occurs by the power of some higher intellect, whereby a person, through such imaginings, is brought to the knowledge of such things, and this does not happen solely by the power of celestial bodies. Again, that which is done by the power of celestial bodies is a natural effect, since they are natural forms that are caused in this lower world by the powers of celestial bodies. Hence, that which cannot be natural to anything cannot be caused by the power of the celestial bodies. However, certain such things are said to occur through the aforementioned operations, like doors unlocking in someone's presence, someone being rendered invisible, and many other such reported phenomena. Therefore, it is not possible for these to occur by the power of celestial bodies. Moreover, the reception of that which follows through the power of celestial bodies implies the reception of what precedes, but movement of its very nature, is the result of having a soul, since it is proper to animate things to move themselves. Therefore, it is impossible for an inanimate being to be moved by itself through the power of a celestial body. Yet it is stated that by the magic art, an image is made to move of itself, or to speak. Therefore, it is not possible for the effects of the magic art to be caused by celestial power. And if it be said that the image in question is endowed with some vital principle by the power of the celestial bodies, this is impossible. For the principle of life in all living things is the substantial form, because in living things, to be is to live, as the philosopher, Aristotle, says. Now, it is impossible for anything to receive anew a substantial form unless it lose the form which it had previously, since the generation of one thing is the corruption of another. But in the making of an image, no substantial form is discarded, and there is only a change of shape, which is an accident, since the form of copper or something of the kind remains. Therefore, the image in question cannot possibly be endowed with the vital principle. Further, if anything is moved by a principle of life, it necessarily has sense, for the principle of movement is sense or understanding. But understanding is not found without sense in things that come to be and pass away. Sense, moreover, cannot exist where there is no touch, nor can there be touch without an organ of mean temperature. Such a temperature, however, is not found in the stone or wax or metal out of which the statue is made. It is not possible, therefore, that statues of this sort should be moved by a principle of life. Besides, perfect living things are generated not only by a celestial power, but also from seed, for man and the sun generate man. Those which are generated by a celestial power alone, without seed, are animals formed by putrefaction. These belong to a lower grade than the others. Accordingly, if these images be endowed with the vital principle by a celestial power alone, so as to move themselves, it follows that they belong to the lowest grade of animals. And yet this would be false if they worked by an intrinsic principle of life, since among their operations some are of high degree, for they give answers about hidden things. Therefore, it is not possible that their operations and movements proceed from a principle of life. Again, we find sometimes a natural effect produced by the power of celestial bodies without the operation of art. Thus, although one may produce frogs or something of the kind by means of artifice, frogs do happen to be produced without any artifice. Consequently, if these images that are made by necromancy are endowed with the vital principle by the power of the celestial bodies, it will be possible for them to be formed without the operation of art. But this is not the case. Therefore, it is evident that such images have not the principle of life, nor are they moved by the power of celestial bodies. Hereby, we refute the opinion of Hermes in the Asclepius, who, according to Augustine in the City of God, expressed himself thus: "As God is the cause of the celestial gods, so man fashions the gods that reside in temples, being satisfied to live near men. I refer to those animal images endowed with sense and spirit, that do great and wonderful things, images gifted with knowledge of the future, and who foretell by dreams and many other things, who afflict men with ailments and heal them, who bring sorrow and joy to them according to their merits." This opinion is also refuted by divine authority, for it is said in the psalm, "The idols of the nations are silver and gold, and the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they speak not. They have eyes, but they see not. They have ears, but they hear not, nor is there any breath in their mouths. Psalm 135, 15, 17. Yet, seemingly, we must not absolutely deny the possibility of some kind of efficacy being in these things through the power of the celestial bodies, but only for such effects as certain lower bodies are able to cause by the power of the celestial bodies. Chapter 105. Whence the operations of magicians derive their efficacy. It remains for us to inquire whence the magic arts derive their efficacy, a question that will present no difficulty if we consider their mode of operation. For in the practice of their art, they make use of certain significative words in order to produce certain definite effects. Now, words, insofar as they signify something, have no power except as derived from some intellect, either that of the speaker or of the person to whom they are spoken. They are from the intellect of the speaker, when an intellect is of such great power that it can cause things by mere thought, the voice serving to convey, as it were, this thought to the things that are to be produced. They are from the intellect of the person to whom the words are addressed, when the hearer is induced to do some particular thing through his intellect, receiving the signification of those words. Now, it cannot be said that these significative words, uttered by magicians, derive efficacy from the intellect of the speaker. For, since power follows essence, diversity of power indicates diversity of essential principles. Moreover, man's intellect is invariably of such a disposition that its knowledge is caused by things, rather than that it is able by its mere thought to cause things. Consequently, if there be any men that are able of their own power to transform things by words expressive of their thoughts, they will belong to another species, and it would be an equivocation to call them men. By learning we acquire not the power to do a thing, but the knowledge of how to do it. Yet some, by learning, are rendered able to perform these magic operations. Therefore, they must have not only the knowledge, but also the power to produce these effects. If someone say that these men are born with the aforesaid power by the influence of the stars, while others are excluded from it, so that, however much the others who are born without this power may be instructed, they cannot succeed in performing these operations, we reply first that, as shown above, celestial bodies cannot make an impression on the intellect. Therefore, through the influence of the stars, a man's intellect cannot receive a power whereby the vocal expression of its thought is productive of something. And if it be said that the imagination produces an effect in the utterance of significative words, and that celestial bodies can work on the imagination, since its operation is performed by a bodily organ, this does not apply to all the results produced by this art. For we have shown that these effects cannot all be produced by the power of the stars, neither, therefore, can anyone receive the power to produce those effects by the power of the stars. Consequently, it follows that these effects are accomplished by an intellect to whom the discourse of the person uttering these words is addressed. We have an indication of this in the fact that the significative words employed by the magician are invocations, supplications, adjurations, or even commands, as though he were addressing another. Certain caracteres and definite figures are employed in the observance of this art. Now, a figure cannot be the principle of either action or passion. Otherwise, mathematical bodies would be active and passive. Therefore, matter cannot be disposed by definite figures to receive a certain natural effect. Therefore, magicians do not employ figures as dispositions. It remains, then, that they employ them only as signs, for there is no third solution. But we make signs only to other intelligent beings. Therefore, the magic arts derive their efficacy from another intelligent being, to whom the magician's words are addressed. And if someone say that certain figures are appropriate to certain celestial bodies, and so the lower bodies are determined by certain figures to receive the impressions of certain celestial bodies, this seems to be an unreasonable statement. For the patient is not directed to receive the impressions of the agent, except through being in potency. Hence those things alone that cause it to be somehow in potency determine it to receive a particular impression. Now, figures do not cause matter to be in potency to any particular form, because a figure, as such, abstracts from all matter and sensible forms, since it is something mathematical. Therefore, a body is not determined by figures or caracteres to receive the influence of a celestial body. Besides, certain figures are associated with celestial bodies as their effects, for the figures of the lower bodies are caused by the celestial bodies. However, the aforesaid arts do not use caracteres or figures as if they were effects of celestial bodies, but rather they are the products of human artifice. Therefore, the association of figures to certain celestial bodies has nothing to do with the question. Further, as we have shown, matter is in no way disposed to form by means of figures. Hence, the bodies on which these figures are impressed are as capable of receiving the influences of celestial bodies as other bodies of the same species. Now, that a thing acts on one rather than another of several equally disposed, by reason of something appropriate to be found in it, is a mark of its operating, not by natural necessity, but by choice. Hence, it is clear that these arts which employ figures in order to produce certain effects derive their efficacy not from something that acts by nature, but from some intellectual substance that acts by intelligence. This is also proved by the very name caracteres which they apply to these figures, for a character is a sign, whereby we are given to understand that they employ these figures merely as signs shown to some intellectual nature. Since, however, in the products of art, figures are like specific forms, someone might say that there is no reason why, through the influence of a celestial body, some power should not shape the figure that gives an image its form, not indeed as a figure, but as specifying the product of art, which acquires this power from the stars. But as to the letters that form an inscription on an image, and other caracteres, nothing else can be said of them but that they are signs. Hence, they are directed to an intelligence only. This is also proved by the sacrifices, prostrations, and similar practices, which can be nothing else than signs of reverence shown to an intellectual nature. Chapter 106. That the intellectual substance which gives efficacy to the practices of magic is not good according to virtue. We must furthermore inquire what is this intellectual nature by whose power these works are done. And in the first place, it is plain that it is not good and praiseworthy, for it is the mark of an ill-disposed mind to countenance things contrary to virtue. Now, this is done in these arts, for they are often employed in order to further adultery, theft, murder, and like malefices. Therefore, those who practice these arts are called malefics, malefici. Therefore, the intellectual nature on whose assistance these arts depend is not well disposed according to virtue. Again, it is not the mark of a mind well disposed according to virtue to befriend and assist men of evil life rather than every upright man. Now, those who practice these arts are often men of evil life. Therefore, the intellectual nature from whose assistance these arts derive their efficacy is not well disposed according to virtue. Furthermore, it is the mark of a well-disposed mind to guide men towards those goods that are proper to man, namely, the goods of reason. Consequently, to lead men away from these, and to draw men to goods of least worth, shows a mind of evil disposition. Now, by these arts, men progress not in the goods of reason, which are science and virtue, but in goods of least account, such as the discovery of stolen goods, the capture of thieves, and so on. Therefore, the intellectual substances whose assistance these arts employ are not well disposed according to virtue. Moreover, one is not well disposed in terms of intellect if he is incited to lend assistance through committed crimes. However, this happens in these arts, for it is recorded that some, in practicing them, have killed innocent children. Therefore, these arts do not employ the assistance of an intellect that is well disposed as to virtue. Besides, it is an ill-disposed mind that is incited to the commission of crime to lend his assistance to another, but this is done in these arts, for we read of innocent children being slain by those who practice them. Therefore, the persons by whose assistance such things are done have an evil mind. Again, the proper good of the intellect is truth. Since, therefore, it belongs to good to lead others to good, it belongs to any well-disposed intellect to lead others to truth. In the works of the magicians, however, many things are done by which men are mocked and deceived. The intellect, whose help they use, therefore, is not morally well disposed. Further, a well-disposed intellect is allured by truth in which it takes delight, but not by lies. The magicians, however, in their invocations make use of various lies by which they allure those whose help they employ, for they threaten certain impossible things, as, for instance, that unless the one who is called upon gives help, he who invokes him will shatter the heavens, or displace the stars, as Porphyry narrates in his letter to Anebo. Those intellectual substances, therefore, with whose help the works of the magicians are performed, do not seem to be intellectually well disposed. Moreover, that a superior should be subject as an inferior to one that commands him, or that an inferior should allow himself to be invoked as a superior, would seem to indicate a person of an ill-disposed mind. Now, magicians call upon those whose assistance they employ as though these were their superiors, and as soon as they appear, they command them as inferiors. In no way, therefore, are they seemingly of a well-disposed mind. Hereby, we refute the error of the pagans who ascribe these works to gods. End of Thomas Aquinas versus Hermes Trismegistus from the Summa Contra Gentiles, Book 3, Chapter 104 to 106. Based on the translation by Laurence Shapcote, with some relatively substantial alterations to make the translation more faithful to the Latin or to make it more accessible to a modern audience. Read by Dan Attrell. If you would like to support more work such as this, please visit patreon.com/themodernhermeticist. And above all, thank you for listening.